Here's Matthew Santoro giving a list of the top 10 most popular arguments for a god. Now I know he doesn't necessarily agree with these, so my rebuttals are against the arguments rather than against him per se. Nonetheless, he makes a lot of claims about them that aren't exactly right, which I will also correct.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I gotta go. They're watching right now. Okay, bye. Sorry, that was the Buddha. He said this video might be very enlightening.
Yeah, what's that angry spinning sound I hear?
So the existence of God has been a heavily debated topic for a very long time, and those people who do believe in God point out that there are several pieces of evidence that prove the likeliness of his existence. Whether you agree or not will be something I will leave up to you. Here are the 10 most popular arguments for the existence of God. Number 10 are the laws of physics. Modern science has provided explanations of physical laws that make our universe tick. But how do these laws exist, and why do they seem to be so specific?
There are a couple of arguments apologists use that are based on the laws of physics. One is that laws require a lawgiver, which confuses physical laws, which are merely descriptions of regularities, with behests, like legislated laws are behests. The other is the fine-tuning argument.
They appear to create a sustainable balance so that no one law can overpower the others. If anything could go faster than the speed of light, we might have been destroyed by something billions of light years away that built up an infinitely increasing speed. If other physical laws were set differently, or unleashed to infinity, we would most likely not exist, nor would any other life forms. The fact that nothing can break these natural laws makes it seem like something intelligent is setting those limits. Some people argue that God could be the mastermind behind the laws of physics, and that if we don't believe that, we'd better learn to accept not knowing because science simply doesn't have a better answer.
So the fine-tuning argument says that life couldn't exist if the laws of physics were even slightly different. Although the argument that the reason why the speed of light is what it is because we might get hit by something going faster is a new one to me. There are a couple of reasons the fine-tuning argument doesn't work. One is that while we can imagine the laws of the universe being different, we can't know for sure that they are in fact free to vary. If they are not free to vary, then there is no need for a god to dial them in to specific values for the benefit of our existence. They simply can't be different. Another reason is that we don't actually know that some variety of life cannot exist in a universe with different physical laws. In fact, if there is a god, and we take that god as being a kind of living entity whose existence is independent of space and time altogether, as many apologists tell us he is, then that god is at least one life form that can exist without any laws of physics at all, let alone specifically fine-tuned ones.
Number 9 are the existence of miracles. One of the longest-standing arguments for the existence of God lies within the presence of miracles in our world that appear to bend the laws of nature in order to create or cause change. The most famous miracle of all would most likely be the Bible's account of the resurrection of Jesus Christ after he was killed and entombed for 3 days.
That a god is responsible for purported miracles is not convincing simply because of probability. What is the most probable explanation for any purported supernatural event? Is it that someone is not telling the truth, either because of deception or error, or that something heretofore thought to be impossible has occurred? Of course, sometimes things heretofore thought impossible do occur, but claims of their occurrence only become convincing once we can get them in the lab and test them thoroughly enough that error becomes even less probable by comparison. That's how the law of conservation of parity was falsified, but that's never been successfully done with any purported supernatural phenomenon. Also, even if magical supernatural events occurred, that still wouldn't prove that a god exists.
Number 8 is the concept of faith. Religious faith in humanity is strong and defies the basic logic of perception, since we tend to believe in something that we have no way of proving is actually there. Some people ask the question, why do we even have faith? And why do we put so much stake in something that may be impossible to prove? Well, they argue that the existence of faith may be a gift given to us, and its effects can change a person in incredible ways.
I don't think a god needs to exist to explain why people believe in things that they have reason to think are not true. Cognitive bias is a well-established phenomenon and a far more plausible explanation.
Number 7 is consciousness and the immaterial realm. By watching and listening to me say this, you are exhibiting consciousness. How you possess consciousness and where it came from is unknown, but we do know that it exists within our brains with no material form.
Consciousness, as best we can tell, is a pattern of brain activity. It's a process. To say that consciousness has no material form is like saying digestion has no material form. Digestion doesn't have a form if by form you mean a shape like an object would have, because digestion is not an object, but that doesn't mean it's not physical. It's a physical process. The same is true of consciousness.
Consciousness is what helps us experience reality.
No, it is the act of experiencing reality.
And yet it has no clear form in reality.
It's clearly an activity carried out in reality.
Meaning it may exist separate from our material bodies in what is known as substance dualism. The possibility of a separate realm where our consciousness resides could explain other immaterial things like God.
Okay, several things. First, substance dualism is nonsense. The idea of a non-physical substance has no coherence that I recognize. Second, you're not even explaining it correctly. Substance dualism is not the idea that consciousness exists outside of reality or in a different realm. It's the idea that the mind is made of a non-physical substance. Third, it isn't an argument for a god. Even if our minds were essentially non-physical, whatever that's even supposed to mean, it wouldn't follow from this that a god exists.
Some argue that if God exists in a way that cannot be physically experienced, it would make more sense that so many people have experienced God through their thoughts and feelings in the realm of consciousness.
But since consciousness is a physical process and not a realm, it actually follows that experiences of a god are essentially physical and are most plausibly explained by physical, psychological phenomena.
Perhaps God is a powerful non-being that only can be perceived within the mind.
Or maybe a powerful non-being which is just an idea in the mind.
Number 6 is love. Though there are multiple theories about how and why human beings fall in love with each other, at its core, love is actually still a scientific mystery. When we were created, we were given the ability to love, but that doesn't mean we consciously choose who we fall in love with. The person you're drawn to and cherish the most right now wasn't exactly yours to choose, which means it's fair to reason that it may be part of someone else's plan.
How is that fair to reason? What does fair to reason even mean? Again, let's apply Occam's razor. What's the simpler explanation? That it was someone else's plan, or that it was nobody's plan at all, and it was just a confluence of socialization, neurology, and circumstance? Why is it not at least as likely that with whom you fall in love is due to a combination of what your brain naturally finds romantically attractive, what you're taught to find attractive, and who's in your life to whom you have the opportunity to be attracted? These are all easily observable variables. A god is not.
In early developing humans, their primal physiology would have them mate with many others because it feels good and because reproduction ensures the survival of the species. But there are those that argue that the introduction of love seems entirely separate or contrary to something that sprouted out of our evolution from primal Homo sapiens.
There are those that argue lots of things that are wrong.
Some people believe that love may be a pleasant addition to evolution, courtesy of God.
The only person I've heard argue this is Dinesh D'Souza, who said that since we have the capacity to love, or at least be concerned with, people who are not carrying our genes, it therefore cannot be the product of evolution. This is wrong because even though there may sometimes be an evolutionary cost to making sacrifices to folks who aren't related to us, as long as empathy is a net benefit, evolution will select it. No feature has to be an absolute advantage for natural selection to select it. If it did, sickle cell anemia would be a lot more rare.
Number 5 is intelligent design in humans. While the intelligent design argument may have been seemingly disproved by Darwin, there was nothing to suggest that evolution itself couldn't have been the real intelligent design.
The fact that evolution looks so haphazard, what with its many inefficiencies and vestigial organs and such, clearly suggests that it is not intelligent.
Evolution is an intricate process that allows a species to adapt and survive by being the best suited to their environment. If this process didn't exist, then life, including us, us wouldn't be able to persist for so long. On a more microscopic level is DNA, which is built with craftsman-like design.
No, it isn't. It's built with trial and error-like design.
With strands fitting together to complete a specific purpose.
They have specific consequences, but one must not fall into the trap of confusing a specific consequence with a purpose. Specific consequences are not necessarily consciously decided purposes.
Our genetic structure forms who we are and causes us to be unique in some way. Our differences create a wider framework for natural selection, which makes for healthier cycles of evolution.
I've heard folks debate this interpretation of genetic variation, so I'm not sure it's true. Another explanation is that genetic variation makes it more difficult for pathogens to spread. For example, a virus, which can kill one person, is very unlikely to be able to kill everyone because in a genetically diverse population, someone is likely to have an immunity. If everyone were genetically identical, a virus that could kill one person could kill everyone.
The argument here is that all of this ensures that the process lives on and its design must have involved some intelligence.
How does that follow? Rather than inferring that genetically diverse species are genetically diverse to ensure that they live on, wouldn't an explanation that is at least as plausible be that plants and animals which are not genetically diverse are not around because they were more susceptible to disease?
Number 4 is the concept of moral values. In their primitive state, humans were brought together by necessity, since hunting and gathering in groups proved more fruitful and, of course, safer. Ain't nobody hunting a lion by themselves, I'll tell you what. But humans could not have developed civilizations and the society that we know today without morals.
Well, they can't really cooperate enough to hunt a lion together without them either.
But what created morals? Morality may not have evolved from within primal human beings, but rather it may have been imbued in us by God. The theory that some people present is that pre-morality humans would have no real reason to stop killing each other.
Well, it sounds like pre-morality humans, if there ever were such people, probably wouldn't have survived very long. They likely would have been filtered out by natural selection.
Or to resist their strong primal urges in order to be perceived as good people. Why would animalistic humans suddenly think that behaving generously or defending others should be rewarded, while acting selfishly should be punished?
Because a society from which such values were totally absent wouldn't survive very long.
Many people who believe in God suggest that our sense of right and wrong must have come from a higher being that acted benevolently and helped us.
And the only argument for this that I've heard is the one I already mentioned from Dinesh D'Souza.
Number 3 is intelligent design in the universe. If you believe that the Big Bang occurred and spread the entire universe into existence, or that God created it, you have to admit that its design is pretty elegant. If the Big Bang did occur, it seems almost too impressive that a seemingly random event spread out all the planets and stars and black holes into a fairly uniform blanket across space.
You don't understand randomness if you're impressed by that. When things are spread out randomly, the most probable pattern is a uniform blanket. If things were to clump into one region or another rather than being uniform, that would be evidence that something is pushing them there rather than the distribution being random.
The fact that our universe is so finely tuned could indicate that it was an intentional design.
We don't know that it was finely tuned. We don't know that the parameters of the universe are free to vary. And the existence of a timeless, spaceless God would actually be proof that sentient beings do not require a finely tuned universe in order to exist.
Number 2 is the first cause argument. The Big Bang Theory is the most widely accepted explanation for how the universe first began. But what created the cause of the Big Bang? This is the point where we can only speculate further using a theory as its base. But if we look at reactions in their simplest form, we know that everything that happens must have been caused by something.
No, we don't. That's outdated Aristotelian physics. Aristotle believed that all change must have a cause. For example, if a planet is moving from one point in space to another, something must be pushing it. Newtonian physics contradicted this. Newton said that an object in motion will stay in motion all on its own. Its motion is not inherently contingent upon anything. Not every occurrence, such as an object moving from one place to another, requires a cause. In order for something at rest to start moving, that requires a cause, but there's nothing in physics that says that everything in motion must have been at rest at some time.
If we don't exist in a time loop, rewinding the cause and effect chain will bring us to a point where an effect simply existed with no cause. With this basic truth, the cause of existence must have been God, an all-powerful entity that created itself and then created everything else, starting the chain.
Okay, again, Matt's not getting the argument right. Folks who make this argument do not argue that a god created itself. Rather, they argue that it did not need to be created. The reason I don't think this argument works is because not everything is contingent upon a cause. And even if some ultimate cause needed to exist, there's no good reason to think it can't be physical rather than a god.
Another argument that some people put forward, which is alternative and much stranger, is the possibility that the chain extends into the past infinitely, meaning there is no beginning and that God may be defined as the true nature of infinity. Oh, that one was intense.
How is that different from just calling infinity God? It seems like this argument simply defines a god into existence by defining it as something that's already called something else.
And number one is Anselm's ontological argument. An argument first brought forward by Anselm of Canterbury in 1070 states that our ability to imagine the concept of an ultimately perfect being means that it must exist. He argued that his idea must stem from something that exists in our universe. Otherwise, how would we be able to think it up?
That's not what the ontological argument says. There are lots of things that we can think up that don't exist. If this weren't the case, fiction would be impossible. Rather, the argument says that to think of the greatest conceivable being, you need to think of something which exists, because existence is greater than non-existence. Two reasons why this argument doesn't work are, first, that greatness in this argument seems like a concept that is difficult to pin down to a precise definition. In what sense is existing greater than not existing? Another problem is that to prove that something exists, you have to prove that it is more than merely a concept. And a priori arguments like this try to prove that a god is more than merely a concept by using nothing but concepts. How does that make any sense?
So the philosophical argument is, why do we understand God so clear?
Well, I don't think we do. The more I read about philosophical interpretations of a god, the less sense the idea makes, and the more self-contradictory or incoherent it seems to me to be. And even if we did understand the idea of a god clearly, we understand geometric shapes very clearly too. We understand a lot about perfectly round circles, for example, but no perfectly round circles exist in reality, at least not as more than an idea. The clarity of an idea is not evidence of its existence. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.